I'm Katie Atwell, co host of the EduGals podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful, beautiful Wednesday. Yes, it's Wednesday, and it may be well into Thursday, depending on where it is that you're joining us from. But as always, I want to thank you for joining us and making us part of your viewing and listening pleasure. Thank you so much for all of your support, all the likes, the shares, the follows. Thank you so much for subscribing to our YouTube channel. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So please make sure that you go visit, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you also for subscribing to us on your favorite podcast player. And again, we haven't done this in a while as far as having 3 shows in a row. But like I was telling our guest here today, sometimes when the stars line up, you definitely have to take advantage of it and you make it happen. So I'm really excited about my conversation this evening with our wonderful guest, Jeff Horwitz, who's joining us. And we're going to be talking about UDL and so much more. So I'm really excited to have Jeff here. Jeff, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. I'm excited to be here and talking to you live in person.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited too. I remember my schedule was full. I know you reached out and I was like, yes, we definitely need to have this conversation, and especially since many of us have already started the school year or we are well into starting the school year. This is one of my favorite topics that I feel that many times gets either overlooked or we get training on it, but then it just stops at that admin level and then it never really rolls out to teachers. So I'm thankful that you are here and I'm thankful that you're going to share your knowledge and your experience in UDL. And so I'm really excited to get to know a little bit about you first as well. And I'm sure that our audience would love to make that connection with you also. So Jeff, before we get started in our conversation, can you please give us a little introduction and your context in education, please?
Yeah, so been in education for 20 years, and first half was all in the classroom, kindergarten through 3rd grade, and then the second half was leading a couple of elementary schools here in St. Louis. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and always been an ed tech guy. Always wanted to try uh, the new thing that came out and figure out how to get it in the hands of my students and get it in the classroom. And that's never left me.
Excellent. Well, that's something that's very important, as far as ed tech, but also knowing how to implement ed tech in a way to help support all our students. And like I mentioned, I know that you work very closely with Katie Novak as well. And, she's an amazing, amazing guest. And that also, I was like, yes, we got to get Jeff here too as well. And so that really gets me excited because as you can see, I'm really pumped up, but I'm also a little caffeinated here with a little coffee soda, but I'm definitely ready to dive in deep. And before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Amanda Macias, who's joining us here in the chat. She is just an amazing supporter of the show, but I know that UDL also is her jam. So thank you, Amanda, for being here. So all your questions and comments, please make sure that you pop them in and we'll make sure and we get to those as well. All right, so Jeff, let's talk a little bit here, getting into the meat of the matter here as far as UDL is concerned. And I want to start off a little bit as far as understanding UDL. I know that we'll have a lot of first year teachers joining, many schools, and we'll have even veteran teachers that still may have not heard about UDL, or like I mentioned to you, some training might come into the district, but then it stops at that admin level and it doesn't roll down. But provide us with a little definition of what universal design for learning is for someone that may be hearing it for the first time.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, universal design is about creating the most accessible, most inclusive educational experience. And you do that by being proactive, thinking about the breadth of students that are walking into our classroom every day, and a lot of, and that we're all different. We all have different brains. We all function in different ways. And so we call that variability. So there's a wide range of variability that's coming into our classrooms every day, and much of that is predictable. And because of that variability, there's barriers that are created. So when we universally design, we design thinking about that variability and the barriers it creates, and we design ways to eliminate those barriers. And you do that proactively. So an example would be that doesn't matter what you teach, you're going to have a wide range of reading levels that comes into your classroom. And if somebody because of that variability, if I struggle with reading, I'm going to have a hard time reading your directions or reading the content. So what could I offer as the learning designer to eliminate that barrier? Well, I could make those directions in a video or a way to listen to them. And then I eliminated the barrier of the reading being an issue. And so I've made the content that I was delivering that day more accessible to that student. And it's just changing my mindset rather than being reactive and going over to that student and helping them understand the directions one at a time.
Excellent. Now, I love that that explanation was pretty much spot on and fairly easy to follow. But, you know, I always tell the story. I came in from business side, marketing and sales, and then so businessman turned educator, and I fell into education, and I absolutely loved it, and been in it now for 17 years. This will be my 17th year. But one of the things that you kind of mentioned here is, you're knowing your student, you're seeing your classroom that you're working with, and you're almost personalizing that and understanding, like, okay, if this student doesn't learn it this way, what are the methods? But then you also see that in changing things a little bit, even that methodology still supports the student that may not need it. So I kind of liken it to the customer service. And so coming into teaching back in 2006, I always tell people I was wearing the cool the band shirt with that, before the band was cool, which is, we talk about personalized learning, and we talk about this. We're talking about UDL. And I feel that this is something that, I don't know, for some teachers, it just seems like it's very difficult to understand. And I kind of get that in a way, because, you come in and your pre-service programs prepare you, but oftentimes, they prepare you with the theory, and in the classroom experience, it's a little bit different. So, talking a little bit about what you're saying, directions and so on. Like I mentioned, many of us have already started school or are now just getting ready to start school. And so, for any first time listeners and understanding UDL, what are some ways that right now, for maybe someone that is either brand new in the classroom, or somebody that this is new to, or that is new to UDL, what are some things that they can kind of look out for and maybe kind of do to kind of help support students?
Yeah, great question. So I'll coach people who are entering into this for the first time to look at their common instructional practices, something you do multiple times a day. So if you can make one small shift in your whole group instruction, then more people will get that content and find it accessible and stay engaged. So that's the first place to start. So an example would be, again, doesn't matter what you teach, you're going to have a wide range of attention spans coming into your classroom. So let's think about the smallest attention span. And the age of your kids. I was talking to some preschool teachers the other day, that might be 30 seconds. And for another class, it might be 3 or 4 minutes. And so I'm going to make sure whatever I think about that lowest end, when I'm going to just start to lose somebody, I'm going to create interactivity. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to have them turn and talk to their neighbor. I'm going to do a poll, a show of hands, get them to move their body or open their mouth and talk to somebody. That'll keep them engaged, and it resets that clock. So that's one quick tip that anybody can do. You determine what that is, but it's probably 6 minutes or less. That's what the research tells us, whether you teach seniors or in college or adults or all the way down to preschool. And so if I create interactivity every minute and a half, that's not going to hurt somebody who can attend to the lesson for 7 minutes. They're just going to stay engaged. And if I can keep that engagement, then that student, there's a much higher probability that student, when we go to do independent work, is going to understand what they're supposed to do. And then they'll be on task there, and success begets more success. So I would have them look at a common instructional practice, think about the variability in our audience that we can predict without even knowing who your kids are. You know that you're going to have a wide range of attention span. And so create a lot of opportunities for interactivity. And those are tools that as teachers, we already have in our toolbox. We know how to do those things. We just maybe haven't applied them with this intentionality.
Yeah, and that's one thing that as you're speaking, that I was thinking about is the tools are there, the teachers have these activities, but it just seems like there's something in that mindset where that shift doesn't happen, where I feel that once a teacher sometimes may see who they're going to be getting in their classroom, it's like they just shut down. And instead of realizing, like, hey, you know what? It's in supporting this student, I'm actually helping support all the other students as well, because even though they may not need, like I mentioned earlier, maybe that specific support, but it could be that engagement hook, or, it can definitely be a way that they've never seen how to solve a problem and things of that sort. And like you mentioned, you start seeing that success. So, as far as that mind shift, Jeff, in the years that you help teachers out and working with educators, what are some ways that you kind of help them and to see like, hey, this is just a quick little mind shift here, and everything's going to be fine, just so they don't shut down.
Yeah, it's working through some of these examples because look, as teachers in schools, we've had people come to us and say, "Oh, here's what we're going to do. This is really going to make a huge impact on student learning," and doesn't always pay off, or it goes away in a few years. So when we come to teachers and say, "Hey, this isn't a playbook. I don't have a playbook to give you, but as you think about student variability, a lot of it is predictable, and let's not make it overwhelming." Okay. I'm not saying rewrite every lesson, every unit, but let's think about the most impactful times. Let's think about the variability. So the interactivity is one. I would just do that until you like, I got that down. That's natural now. Now, every minute and a half, I've got so much interactivity, and it's making a big difference because that student, when they lose engagement, generally they bring others down with them, and especially the littler ones. So then you might say, okay, I've got that down. Now I want to think about some other things. All right. So what are some barriers? Why wouldn't a student participate in a conversation? Well, there's lots of reasons, but there's a bunch of them that might be tied to just speaking out loud. Maybe I'm unsure I'm going to be right. Maybe I have some anxiety. Maybe I don't, English isn't my first language. Maybe I have a stutter or some speech impediment that I'm working on. So if I told you, oh, hey, Fonz, tomorrow there's Jeff starting in your class, and he really is reluctant to speak in front of a group. What would you do? You might say, oh, okay, great. Like I'll have a little whiteboard for him that he can write stuff down, or he can turn and talk to somebody, or sometimes he can whisper it to me, or maybe I'll have a back channel and he can type it in because he's on his device. So boom, like you just named 4 things you could do. Okay, cool. Just assume that that person's in your class already, and we'll just make this shift. And then you start thinking about some of the things we've done before in a different way. Like sometimes we do the popsicle sticks. I had a professor in college, he had a deck of cards. He would give everybody one, and then if he pulled your card, you'd have to answer it. Well, now if I think about this variability, maybe that's not how I would want to approach it. If somebody has anxiety, then they're just going to be worrying the whole period. When are they going to call on me? And then they're not really getting as much out of the learning. So I'm going to rethink how I approach some things. So when we talk to teachers about it who might be reluctant, we want to give them the balance of, hey, you know how to do this, but you haven't quite applied the tools in this way all the time. And there's probably some places where you eliminate these barriers naturally just because of your particular gifts and skill sets. And there's some other places where maybe you need to examine. So this process is also fantastic for PLCs and collaboration because your colleagues will have other gifts and they're like, oh, this is what I do. This is like how I do turn and talks, or this is how I do my whole group instruction. Oh, cool. Can I come watch that? Oh, great. I can adopt that really easily. And so we can make these small little shifts. I liken it to yoga. Like you don't just start yoga and suddenly become incredibly flexible. You make small gains every single time. And by continuing to do it, then you gain that flexibility and strength. And so when we working with teachers for the first time, it's like, hey, just choose one thing that you're going to rethink based on variability.
I love that. And we've got Bonnie who's joining us also from LinkedIn. So Bonnie says, yes, these are universal strategies. They will work for everyone. So for sure. And I love another comment she had here also as well. Move their body or open their mouth. I love this. So simple and effective. And I did a show last week, or actually, yeah, last week over the weekend, and we were talking about my observations when I go into classrooms, and many times it's everything is teacher centered, and as far as students are concerned there's very little communication between them, little discourse, no time for discussion. And I understand that, a curriculum is written, you have to be at a certain point, by a certain date and so on. But I feel that the students are definitely missing out on so much, but the teachers also as well, because like you mentioned, that engagement piece. And I just wanted to share a story. Like you mentioned, I did have a student one year that was nonverbal for pretty much the whole year, but it was because they were self-conscious because they're an emergent bilingual student, they're brand new, and then the fact that they split her up with her twin sister. So the twin sister was in the other pod, she was in my pod. And so I was that teacher that had the Chromebooks every day. And so everything that we did for science and social studies, I said you had the options of creating either a slide deck, you can do a screencast, you can do a graphic, you can do, if you wanted to write an essay just explaining to me what you learned and so on. So I would have a rubric for them. So what I loved about Isabel, that is her name, is the fact that when she would submit her work, she spoke so loudly through her work, and she shared with me and she showed me really just how much of the content she knew, even though she didn't speak it. But then the fact was that now, because she had these elaborate slide decks that I never really showed her how to do it, I just showed her the basics. A lot of the other students were now coming to her and asking her for some help and how to learn how to do these. And so then all of a sudden, the rest of the class just, it was phenomenal. And what I love the most, Jeff, was that by the end of the year, she finally raised her hand and she said, I'm ready to go to the front and present. And her language, her English, her acquisition of vocabulary was so beautiful and so good. And I had to share that with our principals and then with our meetings, because now I had that digital artifact that showed where she started from and where she ended the year. And it was just something so beautiful. And like you mentioned, it pays dividends, in allowing the students to really express themselves in different ways through different modalities, but they're still giving you that content knowledge. So I absolutely love that. That's so important. So now, as far as that is concerned, when you're working with educators too, as well, what are some of I guess we'll go this way too. What are some of the obstacles that they, share with you as far as implementing UDL in the classroom? Can you tell us what, I guess, the main ones that you see, and also maybe some of the things that you tell them to overcome those obstacles?
Yeah. Uh, First of all, amazing story. And it's happened because you believed that she was capable of doing the work. And that's the heart of UDL. If we believe everybody can do it, then we're just got to figure out how. And so you believed in her where some people may have said, like, oh, she can't do it, but you believe. Um, the common obstacles are here. Either are people think they already do it because they offer choices, which it's only part of it, and it's not that, that's really simplifying it. But the most common obstacle I hear is either our district assessments or our standardized tests. They're not going to offer these sort of choices or accommodations, or not even accommodations, but options. So, they're not going to be able to talk their answers or draw a picture of what they know about this. They got to fill in the blank. They have to do it this way. So that's one of the big ones. The other one is um, really making sure that we encourage the district leaders when we go and work with them to walk the walk so that teachers feel it and experience it. It's really important when we do sessions that we give our attendees choices. So if it's over Zoom, hey, we have breakout rooms. You can hop in a breakout room and talk about this, or you can turn your camera off and reflect privately. And a lot of teachers say, wow, like I've never had this experience before. If you haven't felt it, you can't give it to your kids. What we'll say around the standardized tests, what I always say to them is, look, there are going to be things that are out of your control, both what happens to the student when they leave your room, because that's the other thing they'll say as well. They have the great, all this variability about their home life. That's true. And we can do work to build community and we can work on social emotional skills. But we can't go to their house and fix that for them. So we can take on what we can control. So for the district assessments and standardized assessments, my response would be, if students are more engaged and more successful in the classroom from lesson to lesson, from day to day, month after month, it will pay off on the standardized tests, even if they don't have those options. And, we try to mirror life. A lot of our situations in life, we do have the opportunity to choose, do I want an accountant to do my taxes or do I want to do it myself? But there are times where it's just like, no, you have to do this one thing this way. So I think let's control what we can control. Let's give our students success after success, one lesson at a time, one day at a time, and that will lead to it. And your story is a great illustration.
Yeah. And I can see the standardized test, I guess, excuse or barrier coming up a lot because so this last year, Texas changed their state exam where now it wasn't just your regular multiple choice questions. It was, drag and drops, you had hotspots, you had, drop down menus and so on. Well, there was such an uproar, within our district, like, oh my gosh, we need to find the perfect software. We need the students to do drop down menus, and they need to practice, and they need to practice the drop down menus. They need to practice the hotspots. And I'm thinking to myself, I think we're focusing on the wrong thing. Like we need to be focused on tier one instruction because it doesn't matter if the student can click the little, I call it the little shark tooth for the drop down. If they can't get the right answer, is it really going to matter that they can practice the drop down and the hotspots and so on? So what happened is I work very closely with our math content specialist and he's got 3 plays in his playbook. He's an ex-football coach, super bright when it comes to math. He's huge about MTSS because he was that kid that was in the corner like, "No, you can't do it," and that was him. So, he goes in for the math and says, "Hey, we've got 3 moves. It's either left, right, or center," and it's really focusing on concrete, pictorial, and abstract for using math manipulatives, working from kinder all the way up to high school, and he pushes math manipulatives. And oftentimes we get the I don't need them. They don't need them. The students don't need them. They need to be doing it by hand. They need to
Yeah.
be doing standard algorithm and so on. And when he goes and models and he teaches the class, the students are like, oh my gosh, that's so much easier because he doesn't do the standard algorithm. He uses the manipulatives. And that's for all levels, not just, the kids that really need the supports. He brings them out for everybody. And like we mentioned, just because everybody uses them doesn't mean that everybody's going to need them at the end, but they're a different tool, a different way to visualize the math, a different way to really get that concept. And that is what we see now. Now, our district outscored the state and outscored the region, but it was because of that good practice and allowing the students to use the tools. And I think that's so important. So, as far as your work, and going into the campuses, I want to ask you, even maybe here a curriculum question, maybe just in an overall, overarching way. What can schools do better as well to, you know, provide these supports or maybe this UDL within their curricula?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was thinking of when you were talking was you have to create a culture in your school and in your classrooms in where everyone getting what they need is what's expected. So some people are going to use the manipulatives, some people are going to draw pictures, and some people are not. And there's no hierarchy of those things. Um, if I'm out to dinner with somebody and they pull out their phone to figure out the tip, I'm not thinking, oh, but we especially in like a middle school setting, we're so concerned what everyone's thinking about us. Creating that culture where, hey, some people are going to listen to the article, some people are going to read it, and some people are going to have a hard copy, and some people are going to do digital. I think when it comes to curriculum in districts, having off the shelf curriculum can be really helpful in some ways for planning, but making sure that the teachers have the time and understanding to apply a UDL lens to it. So if we're just expecting our teachers to read from the teacher's guide and deliver it, then it's not going to be universally designed. So being able to look at the curriculum, take the essence of it, and we work a lot with teachers and making sure teachers understand what is it? What's my learning goal here? What is it I want my students to all know or be able to do? And then what are some barriers that may get in the way? Then the curriculum is going to be really useful. Hey, this lesson is about decimals to the hundredth. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to use 90% of this curriculum, but I'm going to apply it with what I know about best practices so that I can provide excellent tier one instruction.
Excellent. All great points. And I love like the fact that you mentioned as far as the curriculum and putting in there, some examples. I know that for us, uh, and I don't know if you work or have worked with schools that write their own curriculum. I know that we do, and it's not very often that I hear that, but I know that we try and add those additional supports in there and so on. But at the end, also, like you mentioned, we need to walk the walk, and it's also providing that teacher training and that teacher support. And that way, the teacher, not only the student, but the teacher benefits. So I want to ask you as well on that side, on the teacher side, how does UDL not only benefit the student, but also benefit the teacher as far as enriching their classroom experience?
Yeah. I think this is the other way in. So if you're a teacher and you're like, that sounds like more work, you're going to do it if you think the payoff is really good for kids, or there's some people like, it's really good for me. And I think it's for both. When we got into teaching, what we wanted to do is work one on one in small groups with kids and make this different. We didn't get into teaching to go run around, repeat the directions to four people, or go help three people stay on task, or, those kind of things where then we're being reactive to provide, we're the flexible pathway. Like I will repeat the directions three times to them until they finally get going. So if we can design our lessons proactively, it will create, it's more time we might spend up front, but we're going to get that time back in the lesson. So if everyone's on task because they know what's expected of them and they can access the material so they can feel successful, then I can pull a small group. Then I can conference with somebody about their work. Then I can really listen to them present. So that's the payoff for them. And people hear that and they're really excited. And the other part of it is in UDL, we talk about developing expert learners. And the teachers that I know are like, oh, I want lifelong learners. I want people who are self advocates. I want all these skills in my students that are really not our learning standards. They're just like what every parent wants for their kids. I want them when they leave my classroom to not need me anymore. And that's being an expert learner. And you kind of spoke about that with like the drop down menus. An expert learner If they know the content, they'll figure that part out. And we want them to have those skills to be able to do that. And when they're expert learners, then they do what the child you talked about did. It was like you opened the door to the slide deck and she took it to a whole nother level. And so we want to create these expert learners because we want to give our kids the tools and let them run with it. And that's what's really rewarding. So one will free up time and two will reap these rewards in ways we probably couldn't have even imagined.
Yeah, and right there, everything that you said there really gets me excited because, like you said, that other way in, and I think that that was the way in for me. As like I said, coming in non-traditional education route, or as teacher route, I should say, but coming in from business, I kind of had to learn and understand pedagogy, and but coming in with that marketing, that transferable skill, like you mentioned, I found that rewarding because I was like, okay, if I get to know my students, I can sell them algebra in the way that they need it. And then I would see them be successful. And that was rewarding for me. And I was like, oh, this is great. So, kind of taking that angle that when I got to elementary, when I was telling you, sharing the story there with Isabel, I think one of the things that I found out is by following, yeah, not knowing that this was UDL, but for me just really doing the marketing skills and selling it to my students, I was like, it really freed up a lot of time for me to go in deeper to the lessons. And really, like you mentioned, I saw these students become those expert learners and really in enhancing that learning experience, taking that experience along with them and being part of them because later on I would get messages from teachers in the following grade levels saying, "Hey, they're submitting like something they did in fifth grade, and they have this report, and they've got this, and they've got that because they were able to just use that along the way and take those skills to those other grade levels." And for me, I was like, "This is exciting that they're able to continue their learning, take what they created, and just move along from year to year." And I think that that was so important and the community side of it too as well where like you said if you have one successful student then two successful and then all of a sudden everybody in the classroom is just being very successful, it really does change that atmosphere and it's really conducive to learning. But again, I always offered whatever modality you feel comfortable with, as long as I see that you understand and have mastered the concept, I am okay as long as it meets those standards. And that's something that is very powerful. And I found that my class pretty much kind of ran itself where the students were taking that ownership and I saw them having conversations and it really made it fun, honestly.
Yeah. It, you don't know what's going to happen every day. If it's so scripted, it's like, oh, I'm getting out my manila folder with my unit 4 we're going to do. Then I don't know how you have the joy to come in every single day when you're like, hey, where's this going to go today? Is really exciting and honoring that our kids have great ideas too, and they're going to think of things in ways that we couldn't have thought of. So we need to keep that open.
Yes, I agree. I think I learned much more from my kids than they took from me. I was just really like my friend Kevin Doherty. He coins it that you're a learning engineer and you're engineering the experience, but in the end, they're the ones that are driving the learning. And what I loved is when I had my first class, I would learn something from that first class that I would share with the second, and so I looked a little bit more like the expert. But by the time I got to the last class, I looked like a real expert, but it was really everything that I learned from
Yeah.
my students themselves and sharing and
Yeah.
that helping my other classes be successful as well. And that's something that is really empowering. So I absolutely love that. Well, Jeff, let's talk now a little bit more about your work specifically. I know that you work with Katie Novak and you work here at Novak Education. So tell us a little bit about Novak Education, your work there, and what offerings are available for any teachers, educators, districts that may be interested more in UDL and implementing UDL in their districts or classrooms.
Yeah. So we do all things UDL. So I'll come to schools and train teachers. We do keynotes, we do virtual sessions, We do year long, we do coaching, we do PLCs, we work with administrators. Katie's got 7, maybe 9 books on various connections to UDL. And we just recently completed a self-directed course on our website that's UDL and technology, and how you can use technology to break down barriers and improve accessibility. So I'm really excited about that. There's a ton of courses on the website. There's self-directed courses and facilitated courses, and they're all constructed with a UDL lens, and they're all really affordable. And so what I like about that, I've taken 3 of them, and to experience it as a learner where, you'll get to a part and they'll say, okay, here's some resource exploration. Here's 3 articles to read, 2 podcasts, and 3 videos. Choose 2 off this menu that you want to learn about. And what surprised me is that for myself, I went to the videos, or sometimes we'll put on like how long the video is. And I might be like, oh, I'll start with the minute and a half video. Before I knew it, I'm like, well, I want to know all this stuff. And I would devour them all. If it was traditional, it might just be 1 article or 2 articles, read them both, respond to it. Having the choices was just such an eye-opening experience. So all the courses are laid out that way. And the self-directed ones are great if you're like, my time ebbs and flows. And the facilitated ones, you have a live session periodically where you get to meet with some people and have some discussion. So we've got courses, and then we can come in live to your school. So for people who are like, I want to learn more about UDL, the courses are a great place to start because they're affordable, they're accessible, and the self-directed ones you can do anytime. And depending on your motivation, you could finish one in a weekend if you wanted to.
Excellent. Well, let me go ahead and share the website here. I know I've been sharing the link, but this is the website right here. It's novaceducation.com. And of course, you've got your list here of professional development. And this is what Jeff was talking about, the online courses. And of course, you've got self directed, instructor led, graduate credits, and so on. So you can kind of go in here and find something to your liking. And of course, all the resources here as far as books and downloads that are offered. So please make sure that you stop by the website too and show them some love, because they are doing some great, great things. And as you all know, Katie Novak was episode 99. Also, she was a guest here. So we had a great and phenomenal talk. And actually, I'm going to give you a little story about that. Katie Novak's episode and the clip, the soundbite that I took, that I shared that on TikTok over a weekend after that show. And in the span of 2 days, I had 1,000 followers. And I was like, this is amazing. That little clip blew up, and it is the number one most listened to episode still to date, for my Ed Tech Live. So definitely a lot of knowledge there. And also, I don't doubt that this one is definitely going to get a lot of listens, Jeff, because today you shared some amazing, amazing practical aspects about UDL, not only what it does for the classroom setting, for the students, but also for the teachers. So thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And I know that when you reached out to me, you also told me that you also put the classes together. Is that correct
Yeah,
for
I
Katie?
put the tech and UDL course together, and 2 marriage of 2 passions, ed tech life and UDL. And so to bring them both together was really fun. And it's full of accessible tools for things you use every day. Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Google Slides, just little tweaks you can do to increase accessibility and engagement with tools you use every day.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate all of the shares today. But before we wrap up, Jeff, this is, one of my favorite parts of the show too, as well, where we kind of just lighten it up a little bit, after having a great conversation about UDL, and just to connect you a little bit more with our audience, and just getting, we have one thought provoking and, question, and which is this first one that I'm about to ask. And if you are familiar with Superman, we know that Superman's weakness was kryptonite. And so now I want to ask you, Jeff, in the current state of education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
Hmm. Outside of education, cookies are my kryptonite. If they're in the house, I know where they are. I know how many are left, and they're going down. In education, I think what the way I interpreted this, what makes me weak is educators who are get caught up in their own stuff and not thinking about the kids. So scared to make this change because they love being in control and not and putting up a ton of barriers when it's about the kids.
Excellent. I love that. Great answer. All right, Jeff, question number 2 is if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Uh, I'll stick with the UDL answer that all students are capable of learning
I love that.
with capital All.
I love it. All students are capable of learning. And I know that we talked about it, like you mentioned, it's just really believing in the student makes a huge difference because oftentimes from year to year, teachers can be like, oh, I've got them now. Oh,
Mhm.
I've got them now. But you, it's just that mindset shift of maybe, yeah, maybe they weren't able to do it the year before, but now this year it's like, wow, like everything makes sense and they make those connections. But yes, you just see the potential in everybody. So I love that with all capitalized. Love it. All right, Jeff, if you can turn a hobby, all right, outside of your current work, all right, so if you can turn a hobby or one of your favorite activities into a full-time profession, what would it be?
I'm pretty obsessed with golf right now. So I would say that might be one of them. Yeah, would be to make some money playing on the golf course every day.
That'd be great. I would love that. Just walking out on the course every single day, hitting balls, going to the driving range. Definitely that for sure. All right, Jeff. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for all your amazing shares. And I want to definitely thank all our wonderful audience who joined us live. We had Amanda Macias, Bonnie. Thank you so much for joining us. We had Scott Fleischer, Sherry Fleischer, and then we have also Terry who joined us. And so, thank you so much for all your questions or your comments that you shared. It really means a lot to us here at the show, and obviously for our guests too, so we can engage in some wonderful conversation. So, thank you so much. And for all our audience members that are watching us live, or maybe they didn't get to see us live, you can always check this episode out on replay. Go to our YouTube channel. Please make sure that you subscribe, guys. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Give us a thumbs up. Follow us, guys. We really appreciate it. But also, please don't forget to visit our website at myedtech.life, myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 223 wonderful episodes with wonderful educators, creators, education practitioners, founders, and so on that you can take some knowledge nuggets from and sprinkle them on to what you are already doing great. So thank you so much. And if you would love to contribute to our mission of connecting educators and creators one show at a time, please make sure you stop by our merch store, pick up yourself a cap, a sweater, some loungewear. Conference season for the fall is going to be starting up soon. We've got some really warm sweaters for you. We've got some nice hats for you to keep your head warm while you're at those conferences. And as you know, all of that goes back into our show so we can bring you some amazing episodes, amazing conversations, and some amazing learning. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And my friends, don't forget, until next time, stay techie.